Live, 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 live. Happy Friday. Uh, Fridays are not the best for live because only half the people watch. Most people are checked out. But if you are here, you're dedicated, you're focused, and you'll watch the replay and listen on the podcast later. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. I have Jeanette Rossi. She's the director of clinical research at Granger Medical Clinic. Uh, she's somebody who reached out to me recently from the 483 video I did, and she mentioned that I use Creo and I have to revise our source for some stuff. And she's a Creo power user and was nice enough to send me kind of like a guide for how to create source and create QC checkpoints. Thank you so much, Janet. That was so nice of you. You didn't have to do that. You did. She's going to be at SOS, by the way, saveoursites.com. Sites need to interact with each other more. And this is something that we haven't had. I started in this industry in 2005. And even though we have a LinkedIn and all these other things, sites are still not interacting. So it's a shame. And I don't know why. Maybe we all get busy or I mean, I don't know. Why do you think, Janet, like sites don't interact?
Yeah, good question. I just don't know if the opportunity is easily available there. I think we
Yeah.
would if we knew how to easily.
Well, even like we love Creo, right? I'm sponsored by Creo. They have a forum. They put the tools in place, but
Yeah,
it's dead. It's like empty forum. Like no one's really talking.
right, right. Yeah.
I
I,
think
I
we're
I've
trying to change
posted
that.
some things on there before, but yeah, it's not an active forum. But we can
No.
definitely, I mean, I wish it was utilized more, so because sites could definitely learn from each other on.
Fly Girl says, I think it's time and staffing. I think that's a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Um, we traded names during investigator meetings and CRC calls.
Oh, hey, Patty. Yes, Patty's great. Yes, yes.
Yeah, Patty's always like
I
a
have used a lot of
commenter.
Patty's resources before. I still do
Oh,
to this
really?
day. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. So you know Patty like offline, like
Compliance.
what? Okay,
Yeah. She is
okay.
awesome with compliance stuff. Yes.
So we have Janet Rossi and we've got Will. Will, what's your last name?
William Stalls.
William Stahl. His first coordinator job is with Janet, and Janet is with Granger Medical Clinic in the Salt Lake City metro area. Um, how do you like working there so far, Will?
Honestly, I love it, man. The city's beautiful, and the staff here is amazing. Like we're a really good team, and I really get to. I like how it's more of a smaller site, so I can really focus on like learning as much as possible. So
Yep. And then so you guys are multi-therapeutic, the kind of studies you do, Janet, all over the place, or do you have like
Yeah.
a focus mainly, or just whatever the market gives at that time?
So multi-specialty stuff. So lots of COVID stuff, but gastrointestinal stuff, vaccine studies. So really there's not really a limit. But we make sure we do studies that we the nice thing about being a small independent site is that we take on studies that we want, where
Yeah.
we get the say so on make sure we can collaborate as a team and make sure that it's something that we want to do. So
Yeah.
we don't get them handed to us and say, here it is. We get to collaborate before we take it on. So
That's what I like too. We're a similar multi-therapeutic. Our main PI is internal medicine, and then he referred us to two other PIs outside of his clinic in Yuma. One's a dermatologist, one's a psychiatrist, neurologist. So I get to be, because that's my role, is like getting the studies super picky about what studies we take on. And now I'm starting to like get more sophisticated with what I take. If I have a depression study, I kind of want another depression study for the screen fails or for the early completers, early withdrawals, whatever it is. So we have another study for them. And then I lately I've been looking into these registry studies too. I've never done them too much, but these easier ones to give like a new coordinator because I've been having a lot of staff, a lot of new staff lately, and I think those are like perfect studies to give a new coordinator, kind of like training wheel type of studies. What are your thoughts on that? The selecting the studies.
Yeah, yeah, and another one that's really good too for that we like a lot are just those biocollection studies. You know,
Yes.
those are great as well because those are just 1 day studies. We have urgent care right in our same building too, just right down the hall, and those are
Ah.
just easy to, just consent, collect. They might be here for some, if they're symptomatic with upper respiratory symptoms, you can consent them. You're done. It's just those studies are just easy. You can kind of do them in between those bigger, more complex studies, and we like those studies a lot as well.
And
So,
how did you get started in research, Janet?
so I actually worked in reproductive medicine, and we had the opportunity to do a phase 4 study, and I was kind of thrown into it, and I didn't really know research. We just had an opportunity where patients could have no cost IVF if they qualified for this, and I really jumped into it full force, and I didn't know what I didn't know, and I had a CRA who was really, really tough, and I'm really glad that she was. But we quickly became the high enrolling site and had 75 patients enrolled for this study, and I had 5 monitors there at a time, and it was exhausting. And I was there 7 days a week for about 7 months, and I learned a lot about research. The CRA was really, really tough, and I'm glad that she was. But I didn't know that there was CRF guidelines. I didn't know that there was, I just didn't know all these things that I didn't know. And you don't know them until you know them. And so that's how I really learned about research. I just was happy that these patients who qualified had this opportunity. But that's how I got into this field. And so it was a unique way to get into research, but that's but everybody gets into research a
You
unique
got
way.
thrown into it.
I think everybody kind of does. Research it's such a niche field that I think everybody's, if you ask anybody how they got into research, I think everybody has kind of a similar
Everyone,
story, because
everyone's similar. It's like by accident. And
yeah,
then the interesting thing, unless you're a CRA, which they want to quit all the time, but like from the site level, once you're in, no one really leaves. Like you can
right,
go on and be a CRA or whatever you want to be, but everyone almost gets in by accident and then ends up staying for life, which is
right,
really
yeah,
crazy
yeah,
to think about because the odds of that happening, I mean, it's truly like random, right?
yeah,
Everyone stays. They may not like their company. There's a lot of turnover at companies, but in the industry they stay.
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Yeah, I remember getting thrown into it. I just thought I was gonna do research for like 3 months just to look good on my resume for med school because my GPA was not high, so I needed something to like kind of boost my resume for med school. And the site I worked at started falling apart. Staff left, no payroll. Owners, the admin was embezzling money. So one of the PIs told me, "Hey, you gonna stay or leave?" But if you stay, it's your site. If you want, it's just there's no paycheck. So I had to make a decision there. Like, it does make it's med school realistic? I don't know. Let's see. And I'm still here. That was almost 20 years ago, 19 years
oh
ago.
wow,
So everyone
yeah,
has like a similar story of just getting
yeah,
thrown into it. I also had a mean monitor, but she was
yeah,
good. I'm glad she was mean
yeah, yeah,
now, but oh man, I still to this day I've never had a monitor train any of my staff the way that one trained me.
yeah,
Like unbelievable. And that's when they used to not care so much about hiring like for EQ. Now they hired like the CRAs, I don't know if you guys notice. For the most part, they're like friendly people person
yeah,
type
yeah,
of personality. That's relatively recent because a decade ago they were not like it was probably the opposite.
yeah, yeah. We have really great CRAs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Most people do now. Like they hire
yeah,
for personality now too. I think
Yeah.
if enough PIs complain, you
Yeah,
know,
it's interesting. Yeah, series. It's an interesting thing. There's one CRO that hires PharmDs as their CRAs, and so they're not always the most. They're brilliant minds, but they're not always the most helpful CRAs for our team to go to for guidance in
yeah,
this field. And I think a PharmD background is such an interesting thing to hire as a CRA to send to the sites, because they're not super helpful for us. So it's been an interesting dynamic. I don't know if you've ran into that yet.
not the
But
Farm D, but the RNs. Everyone knows the RN CRAs are not to be messed with.
yeah,
Because most CRAs that don't have a RN background, you can kind of talk around certain medical like lab values, and they won't argue with you about NCSCS, but the RNs, they won't let it go. They're like, no, like this, what do you mean? So they
yeah,
make you like go back and look into it.
yeah,
So Granger, so you were CRC thrown into it, and then CRC at another site, and 4 years, almost 5 years now, director of clinical research
yeah,
at
yeah.
Granger. What do you think? What are the similarities between? Well, first of all, do you think any CRC could be a director eventually if they worked at it?
Sure. Yeah. I think, yeah, anybody could do anything they wanted to do. And absolutely. Yeah. I think absolutely.
Do you think it's a different skill set though that you need to grow into? Because you go more from managing the studies to managing people. Like you're more like a little
No,
bit further removed from the studies.
I really don't manage people. I manage things.
Okay.
Um, there's a lot of moving parts. But I think our team, I don't really, I wouldn't say I manage people. I'm not a very good people manager. Uh, I I think I try to focus on more education than anything else, and because I think that's what I try to do most here. Because I think the biggest part of my job is helping make sure we understand everything. Because if we understand what we do, our job is really easy. It,
Hmm.
you, it becomes a lot easier. A lot of times when you do this job, people just are doing it without understanding it, and that's, if you can't, and I tell people, if you can't explain something if you don't understand it, once you understand it, everything becomes so much easier. And so I'm huge on the Feynman technique. Like, teach it to me. Teach it to
Mm.
me. That's how you learn. Teach it to me. And
Yeah.
once people use the terms in this field so often: 21 CFR, party loving compliant. Okay, but what does it mean? Do you understand it? Okay, Title 21, but what does that mean, Title 21? What does it mean? And so I don't know if you use OneNote. I love OneNote. I have a huge compliance OneNote. You can click on anything in there and go, here's the whole FDA like, what does it mean? Well, what is the code of federal regulations? What does that mean? Where did it come from? And so we have this whole background of everything. Your job becomes so much easier when you understand what you're doing. And so when you're consenting a patient, for example, start there, like, okay, do you understand what the condition is, this indication?
Mhm.
We did an asthma study. Asthma was a hard indication for me. I did not want to start that study until I really understood what we were doing. The LABAs and the SABAs and this and that. And, I talked to our PI for a while, and I'm like, I don't understand this yet. Educate me. I can't explain this until I understand it. I can't explain this until I understand it. And so, but once you understand it, man, your job becomes so much easier. And so
Yeah.
I think that's how I manage, is I just try to make sure everybody understands. And because once you understand it, I think I think your job just flows. But
Yeah. And there's layers to understanding. There's the macro layer, like this is research, this is what we do. We collect data for sponsors. It has to be clean, it has to be protocol compliant. And then you
yeah,
get into individual protocol. Like, can you understand this study? Well, just because you understand this one and the macro overview doesn't mean you're going to
right,
understand this study. And
right,
then you might have like 5 other studies you're doing. So,
right. It starts all over. Yeah, it starts all
yeah.
over again. The rules don't. They're not all one and the same, and yeah, it's
And each vendor too, like this EDC, do you
exactly.
understand how to use it?
Yeah,
Do you understand SIP, Shared Investigator
nobody
Portal?
understands.
Yeah, nobody.
Yeah,
I do not know
I
how
do
to
too.
use SIP.
Yeah,
I could log in, but thank God for Katie and Daisy, who's no longer here. She went to University of Arizona to work there. They were like the SIP managers. But as long as someone at your site knows what they're doing and they can train somebody else on it,
yeah,
you're good to go. Because there's so many portals. Like there's all these things. You have to understand everything when you're on a study.
yeah,
If you're doing a study and there's like 20 portals and you only understand 18 of them, well, I mean that's great. Like in school, that would be an A minus. But
right.
in a
Yeah,
study, that'd be deviation. Like what? What are you
right.
doing?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
missed two major things.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's of course patient safety is our number one thing, but I tell sponsors a lot the thing that you have to look out for is CRAs, they're just like us too. They could be absolutely wrong about things. And so leaning on their guidance is we have to be careful about that. And I will often say to sponsors, my job is to protect RPI. And I have to look out for him. I have to protect RPI and
Yep.
make sure he follows the protocol. I have that 1572 linked on every single thing that he's signing with all those uh, regulations in there. You can click on any single one of them and it will take you right to that exact code where when he's signing what he's responsible for, to remind him, okay, well, how long do records need to be stored? How long do this, what, when he signs that, he knows exactly where to go to remind him this is what he's signing and what that means on there. And because I will often push back with the sponsors, when they say you have to use this set telephone script when you're talking to patients. Okay, I'll use that. However, it's missing this, so we're my job is to look out for RPI. This isn't really following the protocol exactly. So if other sites are using only this is a little bit dangerous because it's missing this
Investigator
information.
extender. Patty says we're investigator extenders. And
Yeah,
then Praneeth says subject matter expert, critical skills, and leadership. Absolutely. I'm not an RN, but stickler with labs, NCSCS is essential. You're right, Jeanette. You have to learn when to push back. One of the things that newer coordinators are afraid of, maybe Will is in this camp. I know my new CRCs for sure. I was just on a teleconference with them this week. We had a patient that we ended up screen failing because of a positive urine drug screen. And it wasn't just one thing, it was like a bunch of things on the UDS. So, but on the exclusion, we had to put positive urine drug screen. The monitor questioned the coordinator. She said, well, did you know there could be a lot of false positives based on the medication she's taking? And the CRCs were going with it. I was muted on the conference call. I wanted to see how they handle it. And they were like, oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't know. And I had to unmute myself and say, look, it's not just this drug she tested positive for. It's this, and that. And taking her medical history into account, she's had substance use, she said 6 years ago, and she's been clean. So taking all that into consideration, no, we have to push back. Like, we didn't improperly screen fail this patient. And then they moved
yeah,
on to something else. But the new coordinator were afraid to like actually push back a little.
yeah. That's an interesting thing too, because a false positive is still a positive, and how do you? I mean, at what point?
Right. Right. It was a psych
Yeah,
study, so a lot of the psych meds, they do have like false positive for certain illicit drugs that we already know about. Well, I knew about, but the new coordinator, that's a new thing to learn.
Yeah.
And maybe in the future we have someone who actually is not on any illicit drug, but it's a positive from one of the meds they're on. I don't want them screen filling them inadvertently either.
Right.
So they got to learn documentation. Well, what is this from? This is from this medication. So there's always something new to learn. This
Yeah.
industry is amazing.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is why we can't get enough people working in this industry, because we always need someone else to figure this out too. Like there's just way too much supply and not enough workforce.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Labs are one of the biggest trouble spots in a study. Delays, yeah, labs. We had this crazy study. That's okay. Most CRCs are type A alphas. So, Janet, you were so nice to send me the guide for revising some of our e-source. We're actually implementing some of it already as of yesterday. Um, you're a Creo power user. How did you? When was your first experience with Creo?
So when I started here, I took the place of the previous director who's retiring, and they had just started on with Creo. So right when Creo very first launched. So from the very beginning of Creo.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did you choose Creo, or it was chosen for you, and then you
It was
learned how to?
chosen, yeah, for us. So it was
I
just
see.
very getting started when I started here. So we were one of the first sites with Creo, for what I understand.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Creo. I mean, we don't. This is not like a promotion for them. I only sponsor, or I only allow sponsors for things I actually use and like. Um, Creo. I've only used Paper or Creo. Never any other system. But do you think eSource helps more with compliance compared to Paper? Like, what are your honest thoughts on that?
I mean, absolutely, because especially from an FDA standpoint, I don't see how it doesn't, because that audit trail is right there. You can see every single time point, when the data was changed, just like you can in iMetadata or Rave. You can see that audit trail, and you can see who did it and when they did it, and at what time point it was changed. And so from that standpoint, yes. Um,
Will, did you ever use something else? You worked at another site
I
previously.
did. When I started working in research, we were switching from paper to Creo as well. So
Okay.
I didn't really work too much, but I was just really on the part of just helping transfer everything over to eSource.
And do you prefer eSource or paper?
Personally, I would prefer paper because I like seeing the stuff in front of me. I like putting my hands on it, and I feel like I can retain information better, like when it's like right there in front of me versus like
Yeah.
I have so much data and stuff on the computer. It's just like
Ah.
just so much going on. But when I'm like focused on a specific study, I can grab this specific study binder, you know what I'm saying? And this
Yes.
specific patient file and not accidentally open something or save it wrong. You know what I'm saying? I just personally would prefer paper, but I like
Here,
eSource.
and you're not alone. Look, we get in this bubble on LinkedIn because most people on there are like advanced and progressive and use like the latest stuff. 75% of sites use paper. So
which is
that
wild to me. I want zero paper,
me
zero,
too. I want to go
zero,
like,
which is,
even with Creo, we're still at like maybe 5% paper with labs and all that.
and so, but that, when you say labs, like, do, do you do certified copies and put them in and then get rid of them?
No, like the lab results from the sponsor. Yeah, so we'll print them, PI sign. PI still prefers like to sign wet ink, and then we'll upload them and e-sign them, like at the visit level.
So you don't see, can you print a PDF and have them sign electronically?
They won't do it. The PIs
Make
are
them do it. Make them do it.
they're close to retirement age,
Ugh,
and I think it's an exercise in futility.
yeah,
There
yeah.
are newer ones in the pipeline, like Dr. Joe, for example. He's the sub-I that they're kind of grooming to be the next PI for us. He'd be okay with it. It's usually like the age, but Will's a perfect example. Here's a youngin. He said paper. So you're not alone. I think it's preference. I personally will never go back to paper
Yeah.
after using Creo, especially with the check. Like, I'm learning it too. Like, what you sent me is very helpful. Like, this is the level of checkpoints you put in. We just haven't been putting enough. You're going in depth. You say you modify almost every day
Yeah.
something on
I'm,
the
I'm,
source.
I'm very hyper. I drive the team crazy. I really do. I am very, I don't want to say like OCD. I'm just very hyper, and I'm very just, and like Bonnie, our other coordinator, she'll say, "You're overthinking this." And I will say, and that drives me nuts because it's like, you can't overthink it. Like, you have to be the type that drives home and think, did I leave the centrifuge on? Did I, like, I want you to overthink it. I want you to read the email 10 times before you send it. I want you to overthink everything. Like, I want overthinkers. Like, I want overthinkers so much. Like, I want you to overthink it. Like, please overthink. Like, I want everybody to overthink everything. Like,
Overthinking is good. Like, you want people paranoid about this stuff.
I know, I do. I want everybody paranoid. But my
But
team's
here's
so
the
great.
problem,
I love
though.
my team. I have the best team.
Here's the problem. We as humans try to avoid those feelings of anxiety and paranoia. There was this book written by, I forgot who it was, some tech CEO. Only the Paranoid Survive. He wrote it like in the 90s, and it's such a good book because the message is like, never get complacent. Even when you figured something out, like, only the paranoid survive. You've got to be thinking about problem areas, pitfalls. Coordinating is running a site. That's like the perfect example of anything can go wrong at any time, even if you figured it all out. So you got to build a culture where you're prioritizing. Like, I don't know if it's anxiety. You don't want a culture of anxiety.
I know. Yeah.
But like,
We're good. We balance each other out. Yeah.
non-complacency maybe, because I'm with you, Janet, too. Like, I try to instill this in the staff also. Although I probably come across like laid back, but I try to tell them, like, this is why this is important, and if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. And there's like a cascade of things that can occur that just ends in a bad outcome.
Yeah.
If you don't do things the way you're supposed to do every single time.
Right. And people often say the FDA's job is to find something, and I say, it's really not. Their job is not to go in there and find something. Their job is to be able to put the whole story together and have it make sense without you there. Can they do that? And that's our goal. Does this make sense without us there? Does this make sense? Can we explain this without us here? And so if something doesn't make sense, and I often try to look back and go, okay, well, what happened here? And like, can I have this question answered without you explaining it to me? Can I have this question answered in this source without you telling me the answer?
Yeah.
And so can it be answered without me going to somebody and saying, what's the answer here? I don't know what happened. And oftentimes it can't be answered. That's where we have to kind of go, okay, well, why not? Let's rectify the source. Let's figure it out. Let's, how can we make the source better something so we can improve this so we can answer this now without you standing here and telling me and talking about it.
Right.
So, I mean, that's our goal, is to be able to tell that complete story inside the source where it all makes sense without us physically here to tell it.
Yes. I'm a stickler for progress notes. Like, I don't care if the e-source is perfectly designed, it never will be. You got to write a progress note. So you need to put a summary of what happened, especially if something that deviates from the norm occurred,
right,
or something that you already know is questionable. I tell my staff, I forget a month ago what happened in this study. Imagine your future self, because the average coordinator stays at a site 2-3 years. Imagine your future self. So when it's Katie, I say, imagine the future Katie being here 3 years from now and you're not here, and I have no clue what's going on, and they get audited and she's got to go through this source and answer questions. I
Right.
think that's the way to like drive home this message. Like, you got to make sure someone who doesn't know anything about this study understands what happened here at this visit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
That's tough to
make
do.
it simple and make it make sense.
It's tough
You
to
know,
do because we all want to finish the visit, let the patient go, and then enter that in the EDC, and then we're done. But
right. Right.
you got to take the extra step. So this is like very hard to communicate to staff. And I think
Right.
QC, it sounds like you take more of a QC role at your site too.
I think we all do. I think we all do. We're all we don't really have the main coordinator role. I think we're all very much try to do everything. We really try to be, when it says who does regulatory, we all do. We all do everything. I want everybody to understand as much as they can in all the roles and all the parts and all everything. Because again, it's amazing at the end of the day, everything comes together because and I think there needs to be more of that. Data management. What does data management do? And I wish we can communicate more with them. I have a whole log of these queries from data management, and it's a constant ping pong back and forth with this. And are they right? Are we right with our responses? And I wish the query gets closed, but it's the same query on a new patient. And and again, I don't want the query just to be closed out to close it out. I want it to be a proactive thing, and it's just a frustrating experience with this. So I keep this log of our response so we can use that same response. But for example, one of them is a con procedure. The con procedure is for an adverse event, and let's say it's a CT scan, and they respond with, this is not for an adverse event, this is a diagnostic procedure. And I respond with, we're in agreement, it is a diagnostic procedure. However, the diagnostic procedure was performed because it's an adverse event. Please let us know if you want us to change it to a diagnostic procedure. We can. How do you want us to go about this? And it's just closed and it's forever gone. And then it happens again with a new subject. And it's like, well, who's right? Are they right? Are we right? It doesn't matter who's right, but what's right? And it's just, I'm going to do this for 2.5 more years, Dan. And that's really lame. And it's just like, I'll never know how to really answer that because that's not in the guidelines. If it should be diagnostic, if it should be an adverse event, it's both. There's never going to be a solution.
This documentation is, the questions come up over these site-centric tools, right? Like, I love VersaTrail. I don't know if you get a chance to play with it. They recently got acquired by Florence, but they kept the product. So it's these like bookmarks for all these vendors. Do you guys use VersaTrail? It's amazing.
We have used VersaTrail.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I wish I had this when I started in research because I had to like have a Evernote, and before that a Word document with all the links and everything. And then before that, I don't even know, people just memorized their links and passwords or like saved bookmarks in their browser. But how do you train a new coordinator? Like, when they come, hey, here's all your links. And now they're like 15 of them per study, if not more. The question is like, are these site-centric tools making our lives easier or harder? Because tech is not the same for like sites. There's tech that's sponsor centric. There's tech like ePros that sponsors insist on having, and I understand why. Doesn't make life easier for a site. Matter of fact, the ePros are now source. That is first time in history of research. The source is out of the coordinator's control, direct control.
Yeah, it's wild. And who owns that data? Does the patient own it? That's a weird concept to me too. Like, what if they don't pay their cell phone bill and they lose their that's a weird, I can't wrap my mind around that yet. But that's a wild thing for me too. When
I think it's the site in that example. I think it would be the site's responsibility. And I don't know how they would have that happen. Sponsors give tablets now. The issue really is like managing this, because we went from, the old paradigm was, this is a visit, this is their next visit. In between, we're monitoring like safety, but we're not monitoring data. And now we're monitoring data on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day, even when there's no visit. And you gotta be a stickler for that stuff, because some of those things are important.
And that's where, man, patient education comes in. So important too when it comes. You got to understand things. Patients do too. And so, I have come up with sheets. There's one study that was really, really complex. Patients had to go to multiple sites. And I'm like, man, patients need a guide to say, this day you have to be fasting you have to take your pill 3 hours before your study visit. This day you're going to go here to this location and but you can't have anything to eat for 4 hours, not even gum. And this day you're going to go here, but you can't wear any metal on your clothes. And this day you're going to go here and da-da-da-da-da. And this is the window and this is the timeline and yada, yada. I couldn't just give that patient this guide because that's not IRB approved, even though this is going to be so helpful. So then I had to go to the sponsor and say, can we please give this to the patient? Because this is what they need. This is all their visit windows from the time that they enroll, all their locations, all their things, because patient education is so important too. They need to understand, what they're going to be doing and when. And so, man, if we can, it's going to make our job easier too once they understand, rather than throwing them all over the place with all these different appointments and all these different things. So you can help them, educate them as well. Get something like that IRB approved, man, your job will be so much easier. Like, again, it's all about education, understanding. When you understand, it becomes easier. But
Yeah, that's all it is a learning curve for everything. Now the whole decentralized trial, there's elements of, well, let the patient do this from home and that from home, and that's fine. But someone's got to make sure all that data is compliant. And it boils down to the sites. It boils down to people like you, Janet, and Will, that have to manage it. So it's maybe DCT is not such a good idea if we're not thinking about the coordinators also, because the coordinators are the ones responsible for keeping the patients compliant, not the patients themselves. They think, well, the patient's going to keep themselves compliant. Not necessarily. They're human beings. They're not employed by the sponsor to do the study. They're going to live their lives while they're in a study, and that's messy.
Yeah.
This is a crazy industry, and they keep pushing this DCT stuff. So some of it's good, but I don't think they've thought it through. At least they haven't thought about the coordinators.
Yeah.
For the most part. So that's why I like companies like Creo. They actually do consider that. Some of the eReg, Viva, SiteVault, Versatrail for sure. So that's interesting. Definitely, our jobs will always be safe, I think, guys. So that's why no one leaves this industry.
Right.
They might leave companies. Not every company is the same, but and it seems like you guys run a good site. There's some sites out there, they don't care. They just leave their coordinators to drown. And then they know, okay, well, they'll eventually quit, and then I'll just bring someone else in.
Yeah,
that's just how it works.
We might drown some days, but we're happy drowning, I guess. I don't know, but I think we're
good team.
Yeah,
I really like the education aspect, like especially with me being new to research. Recently, if we're not really doing something study related, I'm really she has me learning about a lot of history of research, and it helps a lot. Like when I'm consenting patients, like I was consenting someone yesterday, and she's asked me why is it so important that she has to do her e-diary every day? And I was able to explain to her how important it was that the FDA gave these regulations due to what happened in the past before, when people were just able to take anything. We had elixirs for everything. And just having that knowledge, or even understanding what the FDA, what they started for, or what an ECRF is. For the longest, when I was working, I knew of the document, but I didn't know what the document was. And it's those things, she'll explain it to me. She'll have me explain, or even to the other coordinators, when we all work on things together. And I think that's really important in the way she manages, is because she said, we all understand it. And it's it makes things flow so much better, and it's so much uniform, especially with compliance. It's when we answer queries together, we all pretty much answer the same because we all have that basic understanding of what we're doing, So I just really love that about her,
Yeah, no, that's seems like a healthy culture, and it relates exactly to what Calvin said. Patient education reduces deviations. I think we need to implement a teach-back method more to make sure the patient understands how to take the drug and how to complete the diaries. And like Will, you said, you go a step further. You say the why. You give them the why, because human beings need a why. They don't like being told what to do, and because we said so.
Yeah.
You know, you need a
And we
why.
are, yeah, and we're so grateful for our patients, and we let them know that what they do is so important. We have a little sign in the exam room that just said, medicine can't advance without research. And we tell our patients, like, thank you for coming in here and spending the time
Yep.
to do this, because this is how medicine advances. And it's so true. We appreciate our research patients. We appreciate them so much. And the fact that they are willing to come in here and spend time and, you know, be a part of this study is amazing. And medicine can't advance without them. And we make sure that they know that the work that they're doing is important and it means something. And that data is important. And the e-diary entries that they do, it's important and it's necessary and it's needed. And so we have an excellent retention rate because we make sure that they know it's not for nothing, it's for something. And we need them. And so I think that is why we have an amazing retention rate, is because they know that it's valuable.
Right, because I feel like
and we appreciate them.
I feel like naturally humans like to be part of something bigger. So it's like if you understand like what you're a part of, you're like, wow, on this specific study, I'm helping to do this, that, and the other across the globe. And it's just like, I don't know, I feel like when the patient really understands that and like really realize that they're, you know, part of something bigger, it makes them want to work harder, especially like when I explain like what research is or give them examples of like all those, like when you see those medication ads and you hear all the little fast part with all the symptoms and stuff, I'm like, you're a part of that. You're a part of that. Like, they get that data from people like you. It's just like,
we had a study last year where everybody, or 2021 actually, where everybody was unblinded because the COVID vaccine came out. And so we needed to know, and it was a weird thing to unblind people. That was a weird thing. But so everybody knew if they were on placebo or not. We still had 100% retention rate. Everybody who's on placebo still came in for blood draws. They still came in to spend that time. It was amazing. And like, because they knew that data was important. And it was incredible. 100% retention rate. That people were willing to come 100%. And they knew they were on placebo to come in, have a blood draw, to do, to do that, because that data is important. That study would not have finished if all those placebo patients dropped out. The data would have been meaningless. So when patients know that their work is important, that they're coming in here is important, that they're a part of something, it matters, and that helps with retention.
It only worked, I think, because you guys you educate. You know, we do the same thing. We have a really good retention rate as well, but it doesn't happen like by accident. You know, you have to educate the patient. I really think that why it works for patients. Like, why do we make you do all these diaries? Why do you have to come in within window? Every why. Same thing with a coordinator. Here's why you got to enter the data within 3 days, or here's why you got to answer queries, or here's why you got to document more than you think you need to. It's not just do it because I said
exactly.
so.
Don't just do it. Do it. I need it to make sense to you. You know, like, need it to make sense.
Yeah.
You know, like we get so caught up in these nuances. Where, you know, I had a CRA tell me that a note to file needed to say note to file on it, and I pushed back on that because it's like, no, it doesn't. It's a clarification letter. It's filed in the system. It's a note that's filed. I'm not going to redo this to put a heading on it that says note to file.
Yeah, no.
You know, like, it's not like, I don't think she really understood what a note to file was. I'm not going to redo this whole letter to put the heading on it that says note to file. It's still a note that's filed. You know, and it's like, she said, well, this isn't a note to file because it doesn't say note to file on it. And I'm like,
oh no, who cares? Creo got rid of note to files for me. If we need to put a note to file, besides regulatory, but if it's like in the source, progress note, open up that visit, put, you know, it's all time stamped. Clearly anyone can read it after the visit and write what you want to write. Like, you don't need to call it note to file. You call it whatever you want.
It's just, the lack of, you know, understanding is sometimes it's just, it's interesting, but man, when you understand it, it's just, it's our safety net. You know, when you understand it, it becomes I mean, it's your safety net. You understand it. You can do it, and your job is so much easier. It's just learning is what we need to do and understand it. Don't just do it. Don't just do it. I need you to understand it, and then you're golden. And I don't understand a lot of things. Do I understand this? And I'll push back. I don't understand this. I need it to make sense.
Mhm.
Then I'll explain it to somebody as many times as they need it explained. And if it doesn't make sense, I'll find somebody else who can help me out and help it make sense.
Constantly going down rabbit holes, especially with like new science. I mean, we didn't even discuss that. But the new science, here's the thing, and we got to do a part 2 because I got to get to the clinic. But Janet and Will, you're on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Will, I'm going to put both your LinkedIn profiles underneath. Go connect. The science, educating patients, all right? Understand the new mechanism of action of this drug. Have your PI tell you, hey, what is this? Like, how do I explain it to patients? So that when you do the consent, you don't just sit there with like 30 pages in front of them. Or whether it's e-consent now with Creo, it's on the computer. No, you explain, like, this is the new drug. This was the old paradigm. This is the new one. This is the previous studies they've done. You're giving them the why of why it's 30 pages. And I think that's important too. And I think like a lot of sites don't do this, specifically when they get too big for their own good. Did the CRC used to work at AMC? Not sure which one.
No, neither of us.
Nobody. Private industry. We got to do a part 2, guys. Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We'll do a part 2 on patient retention, operations, and more of like the why in research for staff and patients.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
Thank
Like,
you, Dan.
subscribe, comment, share. Go follow right now, Janet and Will. Bye-bye.
Got you.